Hello and welcome back to my channel. I am Andrea and I am a language nerd. In reality, I'm a nerd about a lot of things, but as you can see, I've been talking a lot about languages again recently, and that's because since my move to the Netherlands, I have been learning Dutch. And this is the first time that I have completely started a brand new language with the intent to actually be able to use that language. I've dabbled, I've done a little bit of German, I've done a little bit of Portuguese, I've done a little bit of Italian, but I've never actually tried to learn those languages with the intent to be able to use them any more than maybe on vacation, and even that, I wasn't planning on vacations to any of those places when I started dabbling. But Dutch is different because I actually live in the Netherlands now, and even if I don't need it for my job and I'm getting by fine, it's not a survival thing, it is something that I want to learn while I'm living here. All of that being said, learning Dutch has not only been a really great experience so far just for me personally in learning a language that is definitely different from the other languages that I've really properly tried to learn, but it's also shed a little bit of light on the languages I already speak, mainly in the fact that it's actually made me realize how much stronger my levels are in French and Spanish. If you're newer to my channel and you want to know a little bit more about the languages that I speak and maybe why or how I've learned them in the past, you can definitely check out a ton of my videos on this channel. I have so many, but I will link one right up here. That is a good place to start. Today's topic is a theme that is very nostalgic for me, actually. I have made videos on this theme about writing, and I think also a long time ago I made one about YouTubing, just like unusual YouTubing tips. But the idea behind this series, is this a series? I don't know. The idea behind the theme is that these are tips that ideally you've never heard before, but even if you have heard them, I'm gonna put a little spin on them. So hopefully I'll give you something to work with that's a little bit different, and I'll give you kind of a new thing to explore and to try. And in this video in particular, for unusual language learning tips, I'm going to tell you things that are actually pretty quick and easy to try out. Without further ado, because I know probably some people are typing comments right now to say, get to the point, let's get to the point. Number one, exaggerate. This is something that you might want to try when you're by yourself. In fact, probably all of these tips are things that you can try by yourself, at least at first. But this one especially, I know that for me personally and for a lot of people, when you're learning another language, one of the hardest things to do is just to be able to take yourself out of your normal sort of native language, or if you speak a range of languages, those languages that are comfortable to you, the sounds, the intonation, the way of expressing, to take yourself out of those and to put yourself into whatever you're hearing. And it's gonna sound kind of weird at first. It's gonna sound different to you. Every language has a different way of being spoken, and before you're really used to it, it can feel very fake. One thing that I discovered kind of accidentally to be surprisingly helpful is to exaggerate. The way I discovered this was with French and speaking to my husband. If you're newer to my channel and don't know, my husband is a native French speaker. I did not learn French with him. We don't speak French together. We actually speak English together, but I did learn French when we started dating seriously, and then I moved to France and I needed to speak French. So I taught myself French, and I learned a lot of French kind of on the job in day-to-day environments, and we don't speak French together, but sometimes I would go to him to ask him pronunciation, to kind of sanity check me, does this sound okay? And I would, say whatever the word or the phrase was that I was confused about or needed a little bit of help with. And sometimes I would say something and he would say, no, it's not quite right. So he'd repeat it, and then I'd say it again and it wasn't quite right still. So he'd say it again, and we would get to a point where I'd start to get a little bit frustrated and like, I don't know what I'm doing wrong. So I would tease him and just say it one last time, super exaggerated, just to kind of show him I'm done. I can't figure out what I'm doing wrong. And to my surprise, more than once, he would say, oh, that actually sounds really good. You got it. And I would be very confused because that was not supposed to be a real try. That was supposed to be a joke. But in fact, I would actually get closer to the sounds by trying to overshoot them. Of course, he's my husband, so he knows my intentions. He knows that I'm not mocking him or the French language. He knows that I'm just teasing, and he knows, that I'm actually trying. You want to be careful who you exaggerate around. You'll want it to be somebody who knows your intentions, who knows that you're just practicing and trying to find those sounds. Or you can do it completely by yourself. That's fine. You don't need to have witnesses for this. This is really just about finding those sounds. I think this helps in both a mental and a physical way. So mentally, it can help you, first of all, just to add a little bit of lightness to the situation. It can make you laugh. You can sound ridiculous and laugh about it instead of getting frustrated about sounds. That can be super helpful just to relax and take a chill pill when you're learning a language. It also can help to hear yourself in a completely different way instead of always hearing yourself in the language or the languages that you're comfortable in, really putting yourself into even a very fictional form of the language that you're trying to speak, or the intonation or the expression. It just helps to hear your own voice sounding very different, because sometimes I think we can get blocked by feeling silly or feeling unnatural in the sounds of a different language. Physically, I think the main thing that it can help with is is actually finding how to create those sounds by overdoing it, by overstretching, by even exploring a little bit within the realm of exaggeration and how you sound and your intonation and all of that. That can help you physically kind of figure out how to make the different sounds, be it a vowel that is kind of in between two vowels that you know, just really kind of stretching between those two sounds and trying to find which one sounds best. Or maybe it's a consonant like the French R, which is very different from the English R or the Spanish R that I knew before I learned French. It really helps you to stretch and to exercise those muscles. Imagine someone who can bench press an enormous amount of weight. I'm not gonna say what because I don't really know what an enormous amount of weight to bench press is, but even that really buff person might never need to lift that amount of weight in their day-to-day life, but their groceries feel a lot lighter after they have built up their muscles. So maybe that's a weird example to give, but that's what's on my mind at this moment. Flex and exercise your muscles in an exaggerated way, and then it will be easier to find that happy medium in between. Tip number 2 is to record yourself, but more specifically to record yourself reading the same paragraph or responding to the same prompt every week or maybe every month as you learn a language. This is one that you need a little bit more time, I suppose, to do, but you can start right now by figuring out what you want to read or to say. So maybe it's a prompt question that is a little bit difficult or something that has the potential to be more complex. So a prompt question like, describe your dream vacation, or what did you want to be when you grew up, when you were little? That would work kind of a different tense. Pick something that maybe you're struggling with or something that you want to be able to do or that would be very useful for you to do in that language in the future. Something that has the potential to be maybe very difficult or simple now, but that can grow more complex as you get better. Or maybe a paragraph that has a lot of sounds that are very difficult for you that you're working on. And record yourself right now, reading it or responding to that prompt, and then do it again in a week. And keep doing that over a period of time. The same thing, the same prompt, and then compare them. For me, one of the most rewarding things, and sometimes kind of painful things, is to go back and watch the videos that I recorded in French. So I did 1 year in France, 2 years in France, and did I do 3 years in France? I did several videos, I guess not several, but like 4 or 5 videos I've done in French on this channel. Not very many, but over a long period of time. And once in a while, I will go back and watch, like that first video especially, the things that I struggled with, the mistakes that I made. There were even some mistakes that I remember cutting out that you guys will never see. You guys never have to witness some of the mistakes that I, made and then had to stop and restart the sentence. I didn't do it a ton, but I definitely did do it probably a lot more in that first video than I did in the videos to come. But going back and listening to my accent, listening to how comfortable, or more specifically, how uncomfortable I was speaking French, the mistakes that I made, everything about my French level at that time. Not because I'm critical of my past self or I want to, look down on my level then, because what I achieved for the time that I was amazing. It was great and I feel very proud of myself. But when I compare it with the next video and the next video, and most of all to me today, I can see such a huge difference, and that's been so helpful for me. So specifically the challenge here is to record yourself doing the same thing, saying the same things, and then you're actually able to compare in a very concrete way the differences between your level then and your level now. I think we all can be guilty of completely overlooking the progress that we're making with languages, because languages are so vast and they come along with a culture or many cultures associated with those languages that have molded and formed the language and vice versa. And it's so vast that as we slowly wade into that ocean of this new language, we realize just how much more we have to learn. When you're starting, it can feel overwhelming, but I think as you're progressing, in some ways it can almost feel more overwhelming because you start to actually concretely realize what you don't know. At the beginning, you don't know anything. So it's all open-ended. You know that you're a beginner. You have kind of that excuse to fall back on. But when you learn more, when you start to have that foundation, it can feel more like you should know even more. So it's really helpful to remind ourselves of our progress, and there is nothing, in my opinion, that's more helpful than actually hearing yourself speak the language and say the same words, the same sounds, the same phrases, or try to respond to the same prompt and be able to do it a little bit better each time. Number 3, talk to yourself in the shower. Yes, I am completely serious. I think it's safe to say that we've probably all had at least one experience in our lives where we have had what feels like an epiphany in the shower, or just a really good idea, or even you just enjoy your showers as that moment to kind of let your mind run free. We think differently, I think. We have the white noise of the shower going, we're in a moment by ourselves, we're doing something that, even if you have a fairly intense shower routine, I don't, but maybe you do, but even so, it's probably something of a routine for you. You have a certain amount of steps, you go through them. I have discovered that showering is one of the best times to practice a language. What I like to do personally is a little bit as if I'm on a podcast. like some sort of really boring podcast about my life story. I like to give myself some fictional question to answer about myself, or, what I'm doing this week or next month, or something that is about a subject that I'm trying to work on with that language. Whatever it is, it does not have to be anything of great artistic quality, because you're the only one who's going to hear it. You're just talking to yourself. And that's also something that I think is super useful with that language. Don't just practice it when you have somebody across from you to perform for, in a way. It doesn't need to be that way, but that can be how it feels. Do it for yourself. Talk to yourself as if you're just talking in a microphone and you're never going to publish it. Just tell a story. Go off in as many tangents as you want. No one's here to tell you not to. If you start down a specific road and you decide you don't actually want to talk about that in this fictional podcast, back up, start again, doesn't matter. No one is listening to you. No one is there to judge you with your language. What's really helpful for me is the fluidity, is finding those gaps. Sometimes you only find them when you're trying to express something and you realize you don't quite know how to express that yet. But it's completely no pressure, and it's completely up to you how much you want to do it, what you want to talk about, and how much you want to exercise, I guess, those gaps. Something about the environment of the shower is just really calming, and it can give you this sense of security that you don't necessarily have if you're practicing in a classroom, or if you're practicing even by yourself, but in a more like at your computer, at your desk. It can feel a little bit more pressuring than just while you're showering, you just talk to yourself in that language. Number 4, sing along with songs while reading the lyrics. I have talked a lot in my videos about how powerful music can be, especially for me as a musician on a personal level, but also with language learning. I've talked a lot about how I love to explore new songs and new artists in different languages. I've done this in many different forms though, so sometimes I just like to listen to the song and maybe sing along here and there when I can pick up the words, or maybe I read the lyrics and try and memorize some of them. Maybe sometimes I also want to investigate the meaning behind all of the lyrics. Those are all great things. I recommend you do those. You probably have been recommended to do that before. But specifically what I've been doing lately with Spanish that is super fun, and what I wanted to mention in this video, is pulling the lyrics up in front of you and playing the song and singing along with it word for word. Even if maybe you don't understand something in that moment, go along with it for now. You can come back later and look it up. Just practice singing it at the rhythm and the pace with the artist. You can also do this at any level. So you can start with like a really slow ballad that is fairly simple or repetitive, so you can kind of have the same words and phrases over and over again. You can also do something that's really intense and a super, super fast tempo. You can choose anything, you can choose any level, and you can try one and decide, actually, this is probably above the level that I can do right now, and then pick a different song. But practice singing along with the artist until you feel comfortable. That's something I've been trying to do with a few Spanish songs in particular. What's really interesting is that oftentimes in music, you will have instances, depending on the rhythm of the song and how the words kind of fit into that rhythm, you'll have instances of completely contracted or kind of mashed together syllables and words, and things will kind of come at a different rhythm and pace than they might in speech. And yes, that's not always a translation to how you want to speak them when you're just speaking and not singing, but it can help you try and form those sounds and those phrases in a challenging way. Because when we're speaking a language, especially as a non-native speaker of that language, we're gonna speak it maybe a little bit slower and with a little bit more intention in our sounds than a native speaker will. But when you sing and you're trying to match a certain pace and rhythm, it can kind of enlighten you to those moments when you need to speak a little bit faster, or those syllables and those, consonants and vowels need to come a little bit more naturally. It really works with your fluidity. It can help you to find those sounds, to put them together, to become more smooth and more confident in those sounds. Like I said, start at a place that's comfortable with you. You don't have to go immediately to the fastest song that you know with a million words a minute, but give it a try. I'm finding it really, really fun, and I'm finding it a really good challenge that's helping me a lot with my, rhythm and flow in Spanish. Tip number 5 is to change the language on your phone, and maybe even more specifically, the language of certain apps. Now, you'll want to do this at a point when you're not going to get yourself locked out of your phone accidentally, so you want to be like at a certain level with the language where you can at least do the basics, and if you need to change it back into a different language or something, you still can find your way there in that language. But if you're there already, definitely give this a try. I did this with French. I changed my phone language to French when I was learning French, and it helped me remember stuff. It wasn't even that it taught me things, because a lot of the words I already knew, but things like save, download, send, things that I knew, things that if you asked me in a test capacity, I could have answered the question, but on a day-to-day basis, I wouldn't always remember it when I needed to remember it. But maybe because I have a very visual memory, I could imagine it on my phone and remember it so much easier, until I got to a point where, of course, I just remembered it because I remembered it. Now that I know that you can change specific apps as well, it can be really interesting. You can do this in your settings if you have an iPhone, and probably other phones as well. And then also some apps have their own settings within the app and you can change the preferred language. Do that, try that, especially with apps that maybe will work certain sets of vocabulary with certain subjects, things that you like, things that you're interested in, things that are useful for you to know. Try changing the language, even of just a handful of your apps. And I think you're gonna find that you learn new things and also that you remember new things because it becomes a habit. Every time you access your phone or that app, you are confronted with that language and you experience whatever that app is in a different language. It's especially helpful if maybe you don't live in a country that speaks that language. You might have to intentionally choose whenever you want to practice that language because you don't have it just around you naturally. So putting it on your phone, having it in a way that you can just access when you don't necessarily think about it can be really, really helpful. And you can choose apps that are useful for you or that are interesting to you for, specific subjects, specific things that you like, specific hobbies, and then you can start to pick up more vocabulary and just get more comfortable with the things that you like in that new language. That is where I'm gonna wrap up the video for today. I hope those were helpful for you. I hope that you've never heard them before, or at least some of them. And if you have, hopefully it just gave you some new ideas, some new approaches, a new spin to think about when you're practicing these things with your language of choice. Let me know in the comments below, first of all, if any of these things in particular are super helpful or super interesting to you. And second of all, I would love to know what language or languages you're currently trying to learn and maybe which ones you're going to try and apply these tips to. I have a ton of videos on my channel about language learning, be it tips or just, my experiences, sometimes a little bit of complaining and whining about my struggles in a language, all of the above, all of the realities of learning a language and living in a different language as well, because even though my Dutch is still very, very basic and I don't really live in it per se, I do live in French and I have lived a little bit in Spanish as well, so that's definitely something that factors into my life and my videos. As always, thank you so much for watching and I will talk to you very soon in another video.